Okay, good morning. Welcome. I'm Rob Howe, Andrew Taylor. So I'm Head of Learning Technology at the University of Northampton. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell you a little bit about what's actually going on. Our new campus is actually opening in August for staff, and in September students actually will be coming into it. But it's been a sort of once-in-a-career opportunity in terms of what we've actually been doing. So, I mean, if you imagine your current institution, if you level it and then build houses on that site and then move to a completely new site and then rebuild again, what would you do? That's actually the opportunity that we've had over the past 5 years. So loads of questions, massive amounts of culture change in terms of if you're going to try and pull the rugs from under the academics, we've done it in every which way possible. So there's a lot of sort of challenges that have actually arisen as part of that process, lots of change management as part of that process. As I say here, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the story so far. This is very much an evolving story. We're learning stuff as we go. We haven't got all of the answers, and things are very much keep changing, keep evolving. So hopefully, if we do this chat perhaps in a year's time, we can tell you a little bit about, again, what worked when we actually opened the campus, what didn't work. So we try to be sort of quite open and honest about these things because, that's the only way that we learn and hopefully move forward. Sorry, there's going to be some bullet points and numbering, so I have to apologise for these things. Okay, so I'm not going to talk through these. You can read the items that are actually on there. That's what I'm going to do, and that's what Andrew's going to actually do as well. He's far more talky than I am, so he's probably got less slides and more of the talking side of things. Okay, so the campus itself, it's a completely new site, so essentially we've taken an area. If you've ever been to Northampton, there's an Avon building. What we've done is we've bought a lot of the land all the way around the Avon building. We've surrounded it, so we've surrounded Avon essentially with our university. So we've basically built buildings all the way around that area. So it's a complete brownfield site. 21st century, obviously lots of people put buzzwords in about 21st century, but what actually is a university for the 21st century? Is it just a university with a much bigger lecture theatre? Well, we didn't think so. So we've actually gone completely the other way. So rather than going to bigger and bigger, we've actually gone smaller, which has actually completely reversed the trend of what a lot of other institutions are actually doing at the moment. So we started with a learning and teaching strategy, so we've very much got a move towards what's called active blended learning, which is sort of mixing up the idea of blended learning activity. If you look at your students in lecture theatres, and I know, most of you have seen pictures of this, students looking bored, sleepy and all the rest of it in lecture theatres, where is the learning actually happening? Is it happening in the lecture theatre? Particularly if you're in like the 500,000 seat lecture theatres, what's happening to that person at the back? Or sometimes even the person at the front if that person's really boring actually in terms of the presentation. Is there actually learning happening in that lecture theatre? We didn't think so. So what we've done is we've sort of changed things around quite radically. So what we've done is we've gone to a lot smaller rooms because actually some of the learning happens in the discourse when actually people are being challenged and they're having discussions. That's actually where some of the learning's happening. Some of the lectures, we don't necessarily diss the lectures. The lectures can be brilliant. If you've got a really enthusiastic lecturer who's a great presenter, we saw John just earlier sort of thing, great presenter actually from that side, you wouldn't want to not have a lecture essentially from someone like that. But some people aren't brilliant lecturers actually. They've got brilliant knowledge, but the way that they put that across can actually be done in better ways. So what we're trying to do is actually think about different ways of actually producing some of that. So you start with active blended learning. You then think, actually, how can you design a whole university to actually support active blended learning? So active blended learning was something that was already happening at the university. So all we had to do then was to try and build a new university to actually support that learning and teaching strategy. So that was the challenge that we actually found ourselves in. Lots of new ways of working. If you do space utilisation work at your own institutions, you'll find that a lot of spaces aren't being used efficiently. We've got old buildings, same as, again, some of your institutions. They aren't necessarily efficient in terms of actually doing that. So you sort of think, well, actually, are we going to spend all our money trying to fix the old buildings that we've actually got? And actually some of the rooms that we've got aren't actually fit for purpose and don't fit the strategy, or to basically just level that completely, start again. So that's what we decided to actually do. So lots of challenges in terms of new ways of working, new ways of teaching. Lots of challenges actually involved in that whole process. So we're going to talk about some of the AV side. I mean, we've talked about board-proofing AV. And so really the new site is built right on the edge of the River Nen, actually flows through Northampton. So obviously there was lots of jokes about the fact that it could be flooded and all the rest of it. So we've actually had to spend a lot of time sort of actually raising the level of the buildings to make sure that...
And they were all jokes till it flooded about a month ago.
Yeah, so So we've actually raised the building up actually a little bit in terms of that side. And we're going to talk about some of the AV that's actually gone in there. So I'll talk about it from a sort of learning teaching side. Andrew will talk about it really from some of the technical side and some of the challenges actually that came through that. Lots of links to the strategy itself, as you'd expect. So there's always this bottom-up, top-down thing that people tend to talk about. So we talked about our space pedagogy, smart campus, different student expectations actually coming in. So what do they actually want? Interestingly, our recruitment's actually gone up this year. And a lot of that has actually been put down to the new campus. So it's quite interesting because until we actually had buildings to show people, some of our students, it was almost like selling timeshare in a way. We were actually showing them buildings virtually in various ways. And obviously students were actually signing up as well on that premise. So it was really nice as soon as we could actually get students down to the campus to try and see some of the build that was actually happening. But students are enthusiastic about what we're doing. So we're hopeful that we can give them a great experience in terms of actually moving forward. Lots of key behaviours that we've actually been looking at. So particularly what we're looking at there is about enabling digital transformation. Again, we all talk about doing digital transformation, but are we really doing that? And actually, if you look at some of the stuff that we're doing, it's been really interesting actually because some of it you don't get. It's almost like bits of a jigsaw in a way. And it's only when you see the full picture, it suddenly starts to make sense. And certainly that happened when we were actually doing some of our training sessions quite recently. We've brought in a barcode system. So it's one of the suppliers that we've been actually working with. Sorry, lots of bullet points again. We will apologise for that. So we brought in barcodes as one of our suppliers that's actually been working for this. And again, I know some of you have got Kramer, some of you have got other wireless presentation type systems. For us, actually, we reviewed a few of the systems that are actually out there, and for us, actually, this worked quite well. And we're not just doing it, we did, obviously, as everyone would expect to do, we've done a few pilots, we put it in a few small rooms, tried it out. You can see some of the benefits there in terms of where we actually were for academics. And to be honest, if you've worked with wireless presentation type systems, then you get used to it very, very quickly. And actually, what's really interesting, actually, it changes you very quickly. So you get frustrated when you've actually got to come up and plug devices in or get a memory stick and plug into a physical device on a lectern, for example. Once you get used to wireless presentation, the idea of just turning up and presenting from wherever you are, so I could just stay seated wherever I was, presenting up on the screen, rather than actually trying to come up and set up a machine, for example, everything starts to happen a little bit quicker. So if you imagine so many times you walk up to a lectern, you plug the memory stick in, you haven't got an idea what the configuration of that machine is. You get away with all of that once you can actually start presenting from your own device. I've got it set up exactly the way that I want it to actually be set up. Lots of other benefits obviously in terms of there. So again, you start to move away from the cables and the adapters. I mean, we've had so many people sort of bring in devices, and then we're scurrying around the Learning Technology office trying to find the right adapter for that type of bit of kit. Because it's a certain version of Mac, for example, that was made in 1964, and you just can't find the right adapter. So again, with wireless presentation, you can get away from a lot of those sides of things, really. It starts to get a little bit more flexible. So you look at it from us, from a tutor point of view, in terms of what we are actually doing. So obviously we're standing at the front, but actually it could be standing anywhere in the room itself. When you start going to some of the wireless presentation systems, it means that you can open up the presentation itself. So no longer does the tutor have to be the main person. So any person who's in the room, who's potentially got a device, can actually start interacting with that presentation. First of all, it could be quite passive, so they could just be listening or watching what I'm actually doing, taking screenshots of what I'm actually doing on their own device. But actually, I could start then getting people to work in groups and in different ways to actually get their stuff up on the screen or to share some of that screen estate that I've actually got at the moment. So rather than me being the main presenter actually on the screen at the moment, I could split that screen up in many different ways, for example, and have different groups actually presenting all up on the same screen with me at the same time. So we all start to collaborate together. So it starts to change the whole dynamic of that presentation that you actually had previously. Some of the room PCs, again, we can get rid of some of those room PCs now because actually some of them were quite dated. It was taking 5 minutes to log in, so if you've got, even if you've got roaming profiles and so on, if you're not careful with your setup, sometimes even that whole boot up process means that you're 5-10 minutes into the lecture before actually you start doing anything at all. So again, by bringing your own kit, wirelessly connecting, you're up within perhaps a minute or 30 seconds in some cases if you can do it really quickly. The display itself, so we've actually started to change the displays. Andrew talked about some of the displays themselves. And actually, because some of the wireless presentation system is all run from the cloud services, actually IT can just tap in. So if somebody's got a problem, just get straight onto the phone. IT can then just get straight onto the system itself remotely, find out what's going on, and connect it without, or correct it without actually coming back to the room itself. So in terms of the various things with Barco, so really from the left-hand side, you've got the very standard sort of thing that I'm actually doing at the moment. So I'm just standing here talking to you. We're not engaging in any way, shape or form at the moment. And then you start moving across the board. So really, in terms of the system itself, this actually starts to change all of the dynamics. So again, instead of just doing that presentation, listening sort of situation that we've actually got at the moment, you start moving to a lot more interaction. So, you know, you can start throwing out polls to people. You can obviously start having a little bit more activity. So I can put up shared whiteboards and so on. We can all start working together on various things. So again, it starts to wake up the students rather than them sitting passively and in some cases just doing something completely different, like checking their email, Facebook, Twitter, whatever it is that they're deciding to do. It starts to move then into other sides, so we can become more of that discussion side of things, so we can have more feedback. So you can start asking questions. As the session's actually going through, I can then start blending those things in. Again, changes the dynamics, wakes people up, and you get more of that, what we are trying to aim for, which is that active blended learning. Again, the systems are helping us actually in terms of working through that. In terms of reflective, and also, I think students starting to work together as well, once you start to get people used to that bit of kit, then it means that people can start grabbing it wherever they are. So wherever they're choosing to work, they can start forming various groups, start working together, and actually that then becomes part of the norm for the institution. So yes, we've done the pilot, we've gone sort of wholesale across the whole institution now with this kit. Once we start getting people up to speed, then actually it means that it starts to become the norm. What we want to do is we want to get to the position where tech just disappears, so people don't even need to care about the technology. As soon as you get people sort of having to struggle just mentally in terms of actually learning a bit of tech, trying to engage with the technology itself, you lose some of that learning, you lose some of that engagement. You know that you've got a good bit of tech when actually people don't even talk about the tech, they just talk about the learning and the teaching. They don't care about the technology because actually it becomes so seamless in the infrastructure, people just use it, they don't worry about what it is that they're actually using. It just blends with everything else. So that's the position that we're trying to get to. Interestingly, we did a pilot, we called it Waterside Week because that's the name of the building that we're actually moving to. And the system itself, I mean, it was a really, as Andrew will know, it was a very nervous time in terms of actually working up to it because the system itself is changing because the weird thing is, this wasn't something we could spec early. So basically we were right the way up to the wire in terms of the system kept changing right the way up to the last minute. So it was an absolute nightmare in terms of actually preparing any type of training material. So even on the morning that we were starting to do the Waterside Week, where we had around about 320 staff coming through our training sessions, we still had technical problems, we still hadn't prepared all of the training material, so we kept changing up to that point. We were as nervous as anything in terms of actually putting it out there. What was really interesting was, of the 300 odd academics that came through that session, and you know how hard academics can be sometimes, I was absolutely blown away by the reaction. So even though there were technical problems, we obviously covered a lot of them, so as you would do in some of the training sessions, the reaction from the academics was absolutely amazing. It was astounding in terms of they got it. And I think for what I hadn't appreciated actually for a lot of them, because they didn't know as much as we did in terms of what tech was actually going on, it actually settled them down a little bit. They knew lots of bits were happening, they knew the jigsaw was being formed, but they couldn't see the pieces fitting together. So once they saw this coming in and they had a chance to try it for themselves, it started to make some sense. So that's where I think actually people went in with pretty low expectations about what they were going to see, and they were really impressed about what they did see. We knew that we could take them to a higher point once we solved all the technical problems, but actually just that little bit of movement was enough for a lot of the academics, so the reaction was really good in terms of that side. The system itself, it's got sort of 6 sort of key areas, so you can see there it goes from, you've got interactive huddle spaces, you can do the classroom. This is just the WeConnect system with Barco, so you can do all of those types of things. The virtual room is the thing that they're actually working on at the moment. If you've seen things like I think the Hive, I think Harvard, and so on, there's like various collaboration space that you can use. That again, they're moving into that space as well. But we can do really 1 to 4, you can do all of those things already, and we're doing all of those in different ways as we stand at the moment. Okay, over to Andrew.
I'm Andrew Taylor. I'm the AV Solutions Architect at the University of Northampton. I've met a fair few of you before, though I've never been up to speak at this particular conference. I think we called this, after a lot of back and forth on some very bad puns, waterproofing AV at waterside. Really, it's idiot-proofing. All of you know that, and if there are any actual academics in the room, you can cover your ears for a moment. We work with the cleverest, stupid people on the planet. They're great, they all know their subject areas really well, but our sort of key goal is to make their lives easy, to make the students' lives easy, and to reduce things like cognitive load. That's kind of the directive that we get from the business, it's the directive that we get from Rob's team. I think Ali's key phrase right at the start of this process was something like, if it takes more than one touch, or if I have to spend more than 5 minutes learning how to use it, you've failed, which is nice. So we need simple systems. We're lucky, like Rob says, that we're going into a blank canvas at Waterside. So our AV team sits inside the IT department. So there's a few things that the IT department as a whole have been able to help us with. One of the brilliant things we're bringing in is software-defined access, Cisco DNA Center, software-defined networking. It has loads of different names, but essentially it's the next wave of network infrastructure. So it's not your traditional switching. I don't pretend to understand it in any great depth. All I know is it allows me to send something from A to B without all the faff of having to reconfigure switches and making sure various protocols are running. So multicast traffic becomes a little harder to deal with when you're setting it up, but a lot easier to deal with in the long run. Unicast sources no longer spam your network with tons and tons of streams and potentially cripple your network, because you can forward those unicasts and effectively turn them into multicast streams, which all comes in quite handy for us because we're looking, as I'm sure the rest of the industry is, at networked AV in a big bad way. You know, we had a plan to put us on a massive digital matrix, didn't quite make it into the design deadline, unfortunately, so it's something we're going to have to sort of shelve and look at a couple of years down the road. But our network team, or our network solutions architects, one of the joys of working in a combined team, we get to make sure all of this lines up and we're getting the best out of that. Citrix, VDI, we want to make it easy for everyone to access the applications they need on any device that we can give them. So we want to support bring your own device, we want to support choose your own device, we want to support active engagement in sessions. You know, we don't want people sitting in computer labs, you know, staring over screens, looking at, you know, the displays on the wall. We'd much rather they were sat in a flexible teaching space with their laptop in front of them, accessing any bit of software. We've done some really good work getting all of our very high demand programs onto Citrix. So we're running Unreal Engine, all of your Adobe products, all of your Autodesk products in real time through our Citrix, and delivering really high-end graphical content through it, which is nice. A hardware strategy or a compute strategy. I just mentioned choose your own device. We have 4 devices at the university. You can come along and select one. We've sort of prescribed one of these. I'm sort of plugged in. I'm not as free as when I do this at work. I can just sort of walk all around the room. But HP 1030s, so we don't like anchoring people to a lectern. We've got rid of all of our lecterns. We've only got one lecture theatre. It's got 80 seats in it. It's a large seminar room. We found that interactive screens at the front of the room, whether they be displays or smartboards, all anyone ever does is just touch them and move their presentation on. So we got rid of that function, and we decided, well, let's make our devices interactive. So our devices all support interactivity at the device. You can annotate over your screen, you never break eye contact, you know, benefits from there. Again, being part of this team, we've been able to standardize all of that hardware, make sure that everything's fully tested, and we know that it's going to work out in our rooms. System Center, my boss told me I had to put that one in. I don't really care about System Center. Basically, it allows us to monitor all of our back-end IT hardware, which now includes all of the AV hardware, automate processes when stuff fails. It will automatically switch over to new servers, new services, etc. And WebEx and Jabber. We're getting rid of traditional telephony. meetings from your desk, all of that sort of stuff. I'm sure a lot of other people are going that way. For us, it gives us a better way of supporting people. It means I can sit at home and support someone in a lecture theatre now. It's brilliant. Just join a WebEx, I can control their screen, I can see them, I can hear them. They can see and hear me, they feel a lot better about life. So that's just the general IT support and infrastructure. So, like I said, we're looking for easy configuration. We do that in a number of ways. We did that in a number of ways. These are the key products that are helping us with that from our various strands of the AV project. So the barcode tool that Rob was talking about is something relatively new called WeConnect. We went out to market and we did all of our research into your Vias, which I think is a fantastic product until about 3 months ago is what we were going to put in. ClickShares, WePresents, they're all much of a muchness. Ultimately, they're all boardroom solutions which have sort of been reconfigured or rehashed or reboxed to go into an education environment. And frankly, like it or not, they don't work properly. There's always bugs. You're always waiting on a release. There's always something that someone wants to do that they can't do. We went back out into the market and we said, well, is anyone doing anything education focused? Obviously, there's another major box out there, the Solstice stuff, which very similar to this. The Barco software as a service model is actually a lot better long term, which I will happily talk about at length, but will take about another hour. Hyperwall, again, ease of configuration. We wanted to lose all of the hardware. So our media walls, digital signage, our large video walls, instead of hardware processing, we've gone for software processing. Getting rid of hardware has been a really big thing. The WeConnect and Hyperwall software means we have one box doing everything that this lectern used to do, and we have one computer doing everything that your big media wall racks would have done in the past. And Overture, another Barco product, happily, that has some synergy with WeConnect. We don't have control panels anymore. These are gone. No lecterns, no control panels, no fixed point of teaching. Allow yourself to walk off anywhere and teach from there. So Overture is a web-based control interface originally designed for theme parks, I think, which can help us put in standardized, easy configuration into every room. You'll see some of these repeated because they all sort of fall into each other. Standardized spaces, we have 116 spaces on the new campus. They are all exactly the same as far as AV setup and AV infrastructure goes. They all have the exact same base. Some of our studio spaces have enhanced audio or ceiling-mounted visualizers if it's sort of an arty drawing, real-time or engineering course where you need to see people filling around. But other than that, you walk into a lecture theatre like this, which we don't have. You walk into a seminar space, you walk into a large teaching space, you walk into a collaborative space, they're all exactly the same. They all have exactly the same control scheme, they all have exactly the same equipment in them. The obvious additions in a collaboration room is breakout pods and extra screens at the side and stuff, okay? Again, we've done that by putting the WeConnect everywhere. Box in a room, sits on sort of a digital matrix. You can connect up to it. I could give you a brief demo if nothing's scheduled in the teapot today, maybe. And NEC LFDs, so large format displays. We've got rid of projectors. They're too expensive to maintain. So yeah, they don't cost as much to buy at the initial outlay, but their total cost of ownership is far higher than a much better, higher brightness, higher reliability, much longer lifespan LFD. So most of our rooms will have 90-inch, just entry-level series NEC in it. We know that we have one type of screen everywhere. It means that from a stores perspective, from a spares perspective, and a sport perspective, we can be in there, change stuff out almost instantly, and we're up and running. We don't have 50 different types of projectors. When I inherited AV, we literally had 50 different models of projectors across just about 200 rooms. It was awful. It was terrible. It was awful. It wasn't even just one manufacturer with a load of different models. It was Hitachi, Panasonic, Sony. Ugh. My lamp orders were awful. We're trying to automate spaces as much as we can. So again, this is using Overture and also using a service, space management service called Planon. In theory, a lecturer doesn't have to come into the room and start it up and turn the screens on. They'll walk in. If they're booked in from 11 o'clock till 12 o'clock, I say in theory, we've actually started testing it and it's working. If you are booked in for a room from 11 to 12, the room will work for you for 11 to 12 and it won't work for anyone else unless you've phoned in ill or something like that on the day and a certain process has gone through. So you don't have to turn the screens on. They're already waiting for you. We'll give you the option to turn them off if you decide not to use them. But just for efficiency, we're going into a much smaller space. We decided the best way to attack that was to automate absolutely everything. It's like I said at the start, Ali, who is the Dean of Learning and Teaching, told me if it took more than 5 minutes to learn or if it took more than one button to turn on, then we'd failed. So the easiest way to pass that is to just take the buttons away. And like I said, it's idiot-proofing. If we don't let them mess around with the controls, then they can't mess the room up, can they? So we're using Overture to support that. We're also using Overture to do monitoring. I'm sure a lot of you have monitoring in from Fusion and Global Viewer Enterprise and RMS and the like, and we're all being a lot more proactive now, not just AV, I think IT in general, monitoring a lot more proactivity, a lot less reactivity. In theory, we should know things are going wrong before they go wrong, giving us the chance to get in, get everything fixed, and not lose that valuable teaching time. You know, our students are paying £10,000 a year to come to university. In our situation, we're moving them into much smaller teaching windows. We can't afford to have downtime. You know, at our current campus, we've got rooms, we've got projectors at this height. Bulb blows in a 2-hour lecture. They can't move it somewhere else. We've got to go and fix that. It'll take us half an hour. You know, we've got to get our ladders out of stores. We've got to find the right lamp out of the thing. We can't afford to have that downtime when we're moving into a smaller space that we need to use in a much more orderly fashion. That's just sort of a brief overview, really. I don't really like doing this and talking through presentations, so I actually prefer to field questions, and Rob as well, if you have any.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
Talk to me more about the people aspect of this and the lecturers and the range of feelings.
Okay, so
Preparation, I'd love to know.
yeah, absolutely. That changed the process actually from our side. So communication is key. We didn't do communication all the time. So big problem there, obviously. So the problem was a lot of the stuff wasn't known about particularly early because some of the stuff that we're talking about now, we knew sort of what we wanted to do 4 or 5 years ago, but the tech didn't exist to actually do it, and that's a big problem. So you've got academics that you are changing almost everything that they're doing. So you're changing the whole learning and teaching process. You're taking away lectures, for example. That by itself is major for an institution, for some of the staff that you're actually working with. We're not saying lectures are bad, we're just saying that actually there's better ways of doing learning and teaching. So actually that's where we've sort of spent more time, I think, trying to work with staff, trying to encourage them to consider other ways of actually doing that large space teaching, which is what they were doing previously. So a lot of people got hung up. I think, again, if you start bearing down into it, a lot of academic staff got hung up on the fact that I can't do this any other way. So if you're telling me that I can't do a lecture to 100 people or 90 people and you're giving me a room of 30, I will just repeat that lecture 3 times, for example, rather than actually thinking about different ways of actually doing that type of material transfer. Because actually, if you then start talking to them about what they were doing in that particular session, it was an information transfer process, very little interaction for the majority of it. Some of them were brilliant, and as I say, there's always going to be some people in the session who do the brilliant lecture and all the rest of it. I'm not taking that away, but actually for a lot of people, information transfer, if that's all they're doing, that's not necessarily about teaching and learning. That's not active, actually, in that learning process.
And another question, are you in any way measuring the before and after effect on what students think, what the students are learning? I'm assuming that some of the learning outcomes may have changed.
Yeah.
Simply, is there a before and after measure that you've got?
Yeah, we've got quite a few studies that are going on at the moment. There's as you would, exactly say. I mean, when you start changing things, the problem is we've got so many variables changing. So, and that is the biggest issue actually. So, we've been desperately trying to measure quite a few different things that are actually changing. Trying to isolate it from all the other stuff that's going on is actually incredibly difficult. The learning outcome side, we've also had, completely separate from all the stuff that we've been talking about, we've had a framework review, and actually, as part of that process, all of the academics had to change or reduce the number of learning outcomes actually that they're actually assessing against, because some of the learning outcomes were complete nonsense, to be honest. And actually they weren't doing anything, they were duplicated. We had learning outcomes on there that actually weren't being assessed. So actually if you start bearing down things to detail, actually quite a lot of the mod specs, program specs and stuff like that, actually they needed some work. So there was actually a review process going on anyway. So they've actually reduced the number of learning outcomes. I think there's like a 6 to 8 sort of limit now on the number of learning outcomes that were in there. And similar to what we were hearing earlier, it's forced people to think more carefully about what they're actually putting in there and to use the right terminology. A lot of people inherited mod specs and various other things. They never bothered to really look at them in any detail.
And how long did that review of the mod specs take?
1 year.
Oh,
yes.
Or not?
Yeah, it's been very challenging, and they had to get a few additional people to actually work with the academics. So my team, I mean, there's been quite a few different teams that have actually worked in that process. There are some faculties that are more up for doing it and understand the need than others. And you tend to know the subject areas that are responsive to these things and those that aren't. And it's probably the same across most institutions.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions?
What's the maximum size of your teaching spaces then in square yardage? I'm just thinking that you've got screens that you fit in.
Yeah, so any spaces that are too large for 190 are obviously classed as sort of a large room. So maybe I lied a little bit. They're not all just 190. We've got small, medium, large teaching rooms based on square footage and person capacity. So I think our larger spaces on average are 40 people. They have 190 and supplementary repeater displays or 290s depending on the size. So if they're long and narrow, fixed point of teaching. Repeaters, if they're that sort of long and narrow, it's dual display. We don't actually have a lot of that. It's the beauty, again, of designing a campus from the ground up and a completely blank canvas. We could go in at the design stage and say, well, you know what, we don't want that really awkward shaped room. We want a nice square room that makes sense to us, please. Cheers, architects, go fix it. So we don't have all those challenges. We don't have the big thick walls. We don't have the horrible low ceilings that were put in 100 years ago for some reason. It's brilliant. This is a completely blank canvas, and we've been able to inform the design every step of the way. So we get around some of the more common issues we find.
Is there still whiteboard provision? Is that
Yes. Yeah, there is. Whiteboarding has been a really, really, really controversial topic at the University of Northampton. There was no whiteboarding. So when we first started looking at it back in 2012, we did, actually I suppose they came online sort of late 2013, early 2014. We had waterside ready rooms, and waterside ready rooms replaced the static furniture with movable tables and movable chairs, and our facilities team came in and painted whiteboard walls on, and everyone just assumed that's the way it was going to be, tons of whiteboarding, because everyone whiteboards. I whiteboard. I love whiteboarding, it's brilliant. I mean, I've got better at doing it on my device now, using Microsoft Whiteboard and the ink space and stuff like that, and to the point where, we do it on our laptops and we throw it up onto the screen now. Because I don't need it anymore, do I? These things are great. I can just scribble away to my heart's content, just keep adding pages, massive virtual whiteboards, it's brilliant. So we do have electronic whiteboarding. We also now have physical whiteboards as well, because we sort of let the academics know that wasn't going to happen. I say we, it was another strand of the project, basically turned around and said, no whiteboards. And there was a bit of an outcry. And I believe for a lot of spaces, we have actually settled on mobile whiteboards that can go in and out and be moved around. And some spaces will be having fixed whiteboards, but not very many, but there will be whiteboarding facilities available to everyone. Yeah.
Okay, any more? We've got a couple of minutes.
Do you do much lecture capture in this new environment?
So we used to do, well, we had an Octo, and so the idea of lecture capture was something quite standard, actually. So where people wanted to capture lectures, wasn't mandatory. We put in a policy around about sort of 3 years ago, I think it was, where we actually said that if the lecturer was being taught in a very standard lecture-y type way, then it should be captured by lecture capture. But if it was more interactive, discursive, and the students getting engaged, then there wasn't necessarily a requirement to actually capture. And actually, a lot of the lectures, as they were, actually found that they were doing that type of engagement anyway, which obviously was in line with the academic learning. We had a review of lecture capture because we also had Kaltura in as well, obviously acting as a YouTube-style storage system really for the university. And obviously we then put Kaltura against Panopto. We looked at what we were doing, where we were going in terms of actually we were moving away from big lectures, and actually the Kaltura interface worked fine for us. So we actually ended up dropping the Panopto interface and moving now solely to Kaltura. So lecture capture, I mean, we wouldn't call it, because we're moving away from lectures, we don't sort of tell it lecture capture, so we have facilities by which people can actually capture themselves. But it's more, I think what a lot of people are doing now tends to be more personal capture. So they wouldn't necessarily be capturing the actual lecture itself, but they might be capturing a 5-10 minute synopsis of what the lecturer was actually due to cover.
Yeah, so we've provided them sort of quiet breakout spaces within inside the larger academic areas where they can go and talk over their slides using Kaltura rather than produce acres and acres of content that no one ever reviews and frankly will be useless in the teaching style we're going to have. So we're providing that service outside of the classroom. It's not lecture capture, it's more narration essentially of a few sets of slides, just where they feel it's necessary. I think people have taken quite well to that as well. I mean, I very rarely get called out to support the lecture capture stuff anyway.
Yeah. I mean, those of you who try to implement lecture capture know, again, it's almost like stealing an academic soul when you try to capture them in some cases. And the kickback is absolutely massive. So to be honest, we just sort of completely dropped that and actually said, okay, there's better ways to do some of these things. Let's fight some of the bigger fights. Fight different way.
Okay, any more?
How long are you expecting the 90-inch TVs to last?
Sorry, how long?
How long are you expecting?
That's a good question.
TVs to last?
NEC are being very bullish with their warranty provision, which I can't share with you because I've been instructed not to, but we're not looking to refresh our buildings for at least 5 years. Once we start in 5 years, we're going to go into a year-by-year cycle, which means the last set of screens that are going in 2018, we'll see this year, will be coming out in about 2024. We went with, I'm a Panasonic guy, to be honest. I always used to buy Panasonic stuff. We ended up going NEC based on our consultants coming back and saying, look at their reliability, isn't it fantastic? And then our first NEC screen turned up on site, having moved to a slightly higher market price point, and then it failed 3 times in a row, and I had to have it replaced 3 times in a row. So I was on the phone to John Garraway, giving him all manner of grief about that. But we've put, maybe should have touched on it, we've put a very, very detailed support agreement in place with everyone. Because of the size of the spend we're doing all at once, I've hammered the suppliers about their support and their support provision and how I don't like their standard warranties. And we've actually managed to get ourselves into quite a comfortable position where we've got some negotiated terms. And again, it's another beauty of going into this campus and doing it all in a wanna. I'm not just spending £500,000 and I'm not just like a little bit of their revenue. We're their largest bit of business in education this year, and it's the same for Barco, NEC, and worldwide. I think we're now Barco's biggest education customer, which means when we ask for something, they jump, and it's fantastic. Rob was talking about how we weren't sure everything was going to work for the Waterside Week. It's because we've been able to sort of use the relationship and develop the product in line to what we wanted. So they're bringing in updates to their live services based on what we've told them we wanted before we went into signing the contracts. So it's been fun.
Thanks. Time for one more, if there's one more question. Oh, one, yeah.
You've automated the academic being able to use the kit in that room, obviously in conjunction with the timetable that we're sharing.
Yes.
How were they
helpful.
Timetabling?
Yeah, and if it goes wrong, does it have to go back to timetabling to read?
It's a slightly more complex process than that. We use Scientia for our timetabling. I'm sure it's the same with a lot of you. We use Planon for our room management, which is handled by our facilities department. Timetabling sits in student administration. Obviously, IT, we report directly into the Vice-Chancellor. So 3 very different bits of the university. We facilitate all of these connections, but essentially the data flows automatically into Planon as sort of the gold standard of timetabling information. So if you come up and use one of the room booking panels, that flows back into Planon and then alerts all of the other systems through a series of just exchange interfaces. So there's no human process there, it's all automated.
But if they're saying that, for example, this session has to move to another room?
We can't do that. We don't have capacity to move our sessions. We have 116 rooms, we have 116 scheduled sessions at once.
Right, it just remains for me to say thank you very much.